we may have talked about this on the first time we chatted, but again, going back to my years as a gamer, I firmly believe like we're all playing a video game. Okay. Whether we can have the Matrix discussion another time, but the internet is a video game. Okay. And so your social profile, doesn't matter what platform you're on, your social profile is your avatar. You have control over how people see your avatar. And I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is because we live in such a digital society now, whether you like it or not, whether you think you're playing the game consciously or not, you're playing the game. You have a profile, you're playing the game. And so when people go, oh, no, I'm not trying to do XYZ with social media, like it doesn't matter whether you think you are or not. When you meet someone, they go and look you up, they look at your profile, and they come to conclusions, right? We're doing it anyway. So part of level one is acknowledging that the game exists. It's just, it exists. And most people aren't even quote unquote playing the game. It doesn't mean you have to go be some guru, but understanding that like it's almost like you have a vacant character. The character's just like standing there, right? And you're choosing to not do anything with the character. Okay. And the jump in level one is going from passive to active. So instead of just scrolling and consuming, when you land on a piece of content, you ask yourself, hey, interesting. How is that assembled? Why are they sharing that? If I was to share my version of that, what would that look like? Right? So you start to go through these questions of what does it look like for me to scale myself? That's what the internet does. You go do a bunch of coffee conversations, you say the same stories every time, you share the same tidbits about yourself every time. The internet allows you to scale yourself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it makes, a ton of sense. Let's move on to level 2. We got 5 of these. So we've got 1 down. We got 4 left to go. Yeah, level 2 I thought was really interesting, including some of the examples in level 2. But level 2, the tidbit I'll give, please, push back on this, add to it in just a second. But level 2 is around curation. It's curation-centric. So you're still not coming up with your own original ideas. That's actually a couple levels, kind of beyond this. You're not coming up with non-obvious ideas. You're just taking other people's ideas and you're curating them and you're sharing them, or other ideas you found. And one of the things I thought was fascinating, there's 2 pieces of this that really stood out to me. One is the examples of Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss as, fantastic curation-centric people. For me, that kind of, it immediately resonates on why that's the case, but it's also somewhat surprising. And it gives I think it calls out that you actually don't need, the goal isn't for everyone to get to level 5. The goal is that there's one to kind of know that there's a progression and then figure out what level works for you. Can you talk for a little bit about the positive example of why Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss are good examples of like a powerful level 2?
Yeah, I mean, curation just means you're organizing other people's ideas versus sharing your own original ideas. And there's a ton of benefit in doing that. I mean, think about how much knowledge there is in the world. The average person, we're not going to read every book that exists in our lifetime, right? So if someone comes along and goes, hey, I read 10 books and I'm going to distill only the important stuff down for you, you can read it in 3 minutes. That's really valuable, right? Because the curator is now saving you, call it 100 hours, right? And so people like Ryan Holiday, his story is fascinating. His mentor was Robert Greene, and Robert Greene wrote, 48 Laws of Power and Mastery and kind of all of these like historical and psychological books, but all of them are curation, right? All of them is him going and researching, taking the old stuff and just modernizing it, right? And making it easier to read. So Ryan Holiday goes, he kind of had a jagged path. He didn't start here, but he eventually lands on Stoicism. What does he do? He goes and reads Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. The average person hasn't read Meditations. And he goes, I'm just going to make this really easy for you, right? And he's curating it. Tim Ferriss goes, hey, you're interested in high performance and how the elite people, handle their lives. I'm going to go interview all of them, right? So curation is basically you saving other people time and you saving other people the learning curve of sifting through complexity to understand something. So you're great at distilling down. And that's a very valuable skill set, like not to downplay those writers and creators at all. It's very valuable.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you call out too, and I think this is really interesting, and we should talk about it for a second, is that I'm trying to think of, there's a wonderful quote that I wrote down. Yeah, you've got it. I think it's on page 10 of the book, which, you start to get to the point of people need to, you force people to ask themselves, do I want to be hyper focused on a niche, which means I have a smaller audience? To your point, maybe I end up with 100,000 followers instead of a million or whatever it is, to use that as a stupid vanity metric. So people can, have a strong point of view that might resonate with a small audience, or you can have stuff that's actually maybe somewhat generic. It's evergreen content. It's stuff that, you can always say something about every single day and someone will be interested in it, and you can have a bigger audience. But, I think part of that is by a level 2, you could potentially have a bigger audience than someone that is super niche and focused. Can you talk about that? Do you believe in that? And anything to push back on that?
Yeah. So ultimately, the role of creation and curation, I believe everyone should strive in some way to do both. There's days where I wake up and I create new things, and there's other days where I curate existing things, and both are valuable to readers in different ways. For In terms of how you build and scale yourself, I mean, yeah, it ultimately comes down to the question of what do you want. But if you're, so I learned this by writing on Quora, the size of the question dictates the size of the audience. So the question, how do I make more money, is more widely applicable than how do I make more money as a nurse practitioner, right? Smaller question, smaller audience. And so when you're thinking about curation as part of your content strategy, it's more beneficial to lean into bigger questions because you can kind of grab all of those readers. But there's a nuance, is that then you want to also have the other side, which is ultra niche specific, so that you, once you get all of those readers and attention, you go, oh, well, now this is relevant to you, hyper relevant, right? So it's almost oscillating between the two.
That's super interesting. Moving to level 3, we'll try to get through the rest of these, somewhat quickly, and I want to ask some follow-up questions. But level 3 then is you're starting to create your own content, but you're making obvious connections between things. You're not in the non-obvious state, which I think is really interesting. Talk about, moving into creation, starting with obvious and how that's different than non-obvious, and just some of the learning curve there. Because I think one of the questions I was interested in, I'll talk about level 4 in a second, but how someone moves from level 3 to level 4, and if there's ever people that just stay on level 3, and if that's a fine thing.
Yeah, I think the easiest way of thinking about it is think of obvious as linear. So, how to go from A to B, So, for example, if someone's a master of Facebook ads, they go, I'm going to show you how to 5x, 10x the conversion of your Facebook ads, right? There's nothing non-obvious about that. It's very like, I have a problem and you're going to help me do a couple things and I'm going to move from A to B, And again, there's a lot of value in that, but it's worth remembering who that attracts and why. Again, obvious content has its place, but it usually has its place for beginners or beginners moving into something more advanced, but that's never going to be the thing for people who are like, I've been doing this for 10 years, give me the crazy stuff, right? So they're just different levels of where people are at on their journey. Non-obvious is less linear and more disparate, more exponential, more it's like things happening at unlikely intersections, right? So a lot of my point of view on digital writing, why does my point of view on digital writing sound different? Because a lot of it comes from the intersection of pro video game playing and writing. That's a very rare, most people don't mash those two things together, right? So non-obvious is connecting data points that almost shouldn't or aren't thought of to be as connected. And then you make the person go, oh, I never thought of that before. Why? Because those aren't two things or three things that you would normally put together.